With their fiery afro hairstyles and high-energy funk steps, the young men of the Commodores absolutely set the 1970s stage on fire. Today, they are silver-haired gentlemen in their late 70s, quietly watching their glory days fade into the past. Behind a glittering Lionel Richie, who still shines under the solo spotlight, are his old bandmates who chose a quieter life, trading the roars of tens of thousands for the simple company of old age. Just look at what time has done to our Commodores. First, let's start with lead singer Lionel Richie. You'll understand why he was the root cause of the band's breakup. Back in the 1970s, Richie didn't just perform. He seemed almost impossible to slow down. With his signature afro, glittering jumpsuits, and effortless stage presence, he could take an arena from the explosive funk of Machine Gun and Brick House to the quiet emotion of Easy and 3 Times a Lady within minutes. Endless tours, sold-out arenas, cross-country flights, and television appearances became his normal life. He looked like someone who might never slow down. That images survived for decades. Even in 2026, many fans expected Richie to keep performing the way other legends of his generation still were. Bruce Springsteen, at 76, was still delivering marathon 3-hour concerts across North America. If the boss could still do that, why not Lionel? Then came June 24th, 2026. After 58 years, Richie walked onto the stage at Grand Casino Arena in St. Paul, Minnesota. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but during Dancing on the Ceiling, he suddenly stopped, told the audience he felt dizzy, lowered himself onto the stage, and tried to continue singing while seated. Moments later, the concert ended early as paramedics escorted him away. His scheduled performances in Chicago and Columbus were postponed on medical advice. For most people watching, the frightening moment wasn't simply that Lionel Richie became ill. It was something like, he won't in the stage anymore. Ironically, Lionel himself had already begun preparing for that reality. Just 13 days before the medical scare, he quietly filed trademark applications, not for his name or his logo, but for the sound of some of the most recognizable lines in his career, including, "Hello, is it me you're looking for? Say you, say me. Easy like Sunday morning, and all night long." At a time when artificial intelligence was making it easier than ever to imitate famous voices, Richie wasn't trying to protect his appearance. He was protecting the one thing he believed could survive long after his body no longer could. That decision says far more about Lionel Richie today than any photograph ever could. Lionel understands that neither youth nor physical strength lasts forever. If his body could no longer guarantee his legacy, then his music and his unmistakable voice would have to do it instead. And perhaps that's exactly why money no longer seems to drive him the way it once might have. By this point, Richie had already achieved almost everything an artist could hope for. His career has produced more than 90 million records sold, 4 Grammy Awards, an Academy Award, and decades as one of the most recognizable entertainers in the world. Financial success followed naturally, with an estimated fortune of around $200 million. There were luxury homes, private travel, and opportunities most musicians only dream about. Yet after reaching the very top, Lionel Richie made a choice that surprised many people. Instead of spending more time expanding his empire, he gradually started returning to the place where none of it had existed. Tuskegee, the small town where it all started nearly 6 decades earlier. Not to chase another deal, but to build Hello Park, a public park funded entirely by him, on the land he grew up on. Instead of Hollywood parties, he's walking under trees, talking to local kids, catching up with families who watched him grow up. He found his peace standing still in a small park in Alabama. Sitting there, he thinks about his old bandmates a lot, the people who shared his best years, the place that gave him more memories than almost anywhere else in his life. He thinks about William King especially, who's carried resentment for over 30 years, Not because Lionel left the band in 1982 to go solo, but because of how long he kept saying he'd come back before he finally didn't. Richie once admitted it would take a miracle just to get all 6 original members on a stage together again. And in 2006, Milan Williams died of cancer. That one hit differently. For Richie, it was the first time he truly felt that time waits for no one, not even for grudges that seemed destined to last forever. Only when time gradually took his old bandmates away did Lionel Richie realize that the most valuable thing the Commodores ever left behind was never just the hits. It was the people who wrote the story of his youth alongside him. And as fate began closing each chapter of that legendary band, all the arguments, all the distance, even the egos of youth started to feel smaller than they ever had before. But that story could never have begun without guitarist Thomas McClary. You know what Thomas McClary's hands used to do back in the 70s? Man, they flew. Fingers just tearing across that fretboard, cranking out riffs so nasty they helped invent an entire sound. Picture it. McClary in a white jumpsuit, guitar strapped on, ripping through that riff while tens of thousands of people are losing their minds in the crowd. That was him. Young, fearless, basically untouchable. Now fast forward. The guy's 76. Look at recent photos and yeah, time got him. Fingers move slower, wrinkles are there. That wild afro is gone, replaced by a shaved head and a salt and pepper beard. His frame looks fuller and sturdier than the lean build he had touring non-stop in his 20s. But put a guitar in his hands and that same grin shows up. Same one from 50 years ago. And he's nowhere near done. McClary never actually retired. He still tours independently, still shows up at events like Growing Boulder in Florida, still nails that easy solo note for note in front of a live crowd, decades after he first played it. His body changed. Whatever's driving him from the inside clearly didn't get that memo. Here's the part people don't expect, though. After leaving the Commodores, McClary didn't chase Hollywood. He walked away from it, moved back to Eustis, Florida, the small town where he grew up. These days, that's home base. Summers, he takes the family up to Martha's Vineyard, the same stretch of coast where the band used to test their sound at parking lot gigs back in the early 70s. Except now he's going there to relax, not to hustle for a break. Home life looks different too. He's been married to Beryl Thompson McClary for decades. She's also his attorney, the one who stood beside him through years of legal battles. And those battles didn't go his way. Courts ruled that when McClary left the band in the 80s, he gave up any claim to the name the Commodores. A federal court barred him from using it in 2016, and an appeals court upheld that ban in 2018, even outside the U.S. Turns out the guy who once helped build an empire off that name spent his later years fighting and losing just to say it out loud on a flyer. But somehow, that's not where his story lands. He and Beryl raised 6 kids together, and these days he prioritizes being present for them over anything else. He also started a gospel music company, stepping fully away from the old rock star party lifestyle, and built his whole philosophy around a phrase he says often now: choose love. He spends a good chunk of his time speaking at events, telling younger and older generations alike about growing up facing segregation and about not giving up on your dreams just because you're getting older. Funny how it plays out. The guy who once tore through arena stages full of fire ended up losing the one thing that made him famous, his own band's name, and found something that mattered more instead. Next up is the man behind the band's unmistakable bass grooves, Ronald LaPread. When LaPread auditioned for the band in 1970, he stunned the group by confidently declaring he was the best bassist around, even though he later admitted he'd barely touched a bass guitar. Somehow the gamble worked. It earned him a place alongside Lionel Richie, William King, Thomas McClary, Milan Williams, and Walter Orange at Tuskegee Institute. They lived together, squeezed onto battered tour buses, shared every dollar they earned, and eventually formed Commodores Entertainment Corporation, so that success would belong to all of them equally. As the Commodores became one of Motown's biggest acts, LaPread developed a stage presence impossible to ignore. His huge afro, thick beard, open silk shirts, and relentless energy matched the powerful bass lines driving songs like Brick House and I Feel Sanctified. During one exhausting recording session, his fingers became so blistered that he instinctively switched from plucking the strings to striking them with his thumb, a technique widely regarded as one of the early influences on modern slap bass. Then came the moment that separated Ronald LaPread from almost everyone else in the band. When Lionel Richie left in 1982, the Commodores entered years of uncertainty. Some members stayed to protect the band's name, a battle that eventually led to decades of legal disputes between William King and Thomas McClary. LaPread chose the opposite path. After helping the group win a Grammy Award for Night Shift in 1986, he arrived in Auckland following an Australian tour, met a New Zealand woman named Faride, and quietly decided not to return to America. Instead of spending the next 40 years fighting over trademarks and business ownership, he crossed the Pacific for love and built an entirely new life. That decision defined the rest of his story. While his former bandmates remained connected to the spotlight, LaPread became something few successful rock stars ever choose to become: an ordinary man. He settled in Auckland, raised a family, recorded music only occasionally in a small home studio, and stayed largely away from celebrity life. Yet he never turned his back on his roots. Whenever Lionel Richie or the Commodores toured New Zealand, he would often reunite with them on stage, including performances at Vector Arena and later Spark Arena. Even just days before his death, he appeared at the 2026 Aotearoa Music Awards, still welcomed as part of the Commodores family. By 2026, the energetic bassist with the wild afro had become a soft-spoken grandfather living thousands of miles from the country where his career began. Then, on May 30th, 2026, Ronald LaPread passed away in Auckland at the age of 75 following a sudden medical event. The hands that had powered one of Motown's greatest bands finally came to rest. Those are all the life he deliberately chose instead. While others spent decades protecting a famous name, he protected a peaceful family life. In the end, he may have walked farther away from fame than any other Commodore, but he also seemed to find exactly what many stars spend a lifetime searching for. Now we move to the man who kept the whole band's pulse going, Walter Clyde Orange. Look at the physical transformation over 50-plus years. Back in the 70s, Orange was pure energy, a massive afro framing his face, a chiseled frame moving non-stop behind the drum kit. Deep-cut shirts and skin-tight jumpsuits played up that wild, magnetic look while he pounded out rhythms and growled through Brick House in that gritty, unmistakable voice. Sweat under the stage lights back then wasn't a flaw. It was proof he was at his physical peak. Today, he's 79. That fiery afro is completely gone, replaced by a shaved head and a weathered gray beard. The flashy outfits gave way to simple, dignified clothes befitting a man in his late 70s. And the hands that once drove the whole room into a frenzy finally got tired. Tired enough that Orange officially stepped away from the drum kit and retired after more than 50 years in music. The Commodore's stage doesn't have him standing guard anymore, but his spirit didn't fully step back. His sons, Cody and Colin Orange, took his place. Their faces and their talent are practically carbon copies of him, like watching his 20-something self frozen in time and reborn on stage, night after night, still playing the same songs their father built decades ago. Rewind to where all of it actually started, though, 1972, when Orange joined a group of broke college kids trying to make it out of Alabama. 6 guys, one dream, sleeping crammed together on cheap tour buses, splitting whatever cash they scraped together from gigs. That kind of hardship bonds people fast. For years, they weren't just bandmates. They were basically family under one roof, and it was that same tight unit that eventually wrote and recorded global hits like Brick House and Night Shift, with Orange singing lead. The royalties from those songs piled up fast enough to fund the kind of life most young millionaires only dream about. Unlike a lot of bands who figure out the money split later, usually too late, usually after a fight, the Commodores got ahead of it, forming their own corporation in their 20s, specifically to divide the earnings fairly and cleanly from the start. Then, 1982 happened. Richie left for a solo career, and the fracture that followed never fully healed. Orange didn't walk away bitter, and he didn't chase a solo career of his own either. He stayed, him and William King both, determined to protect the name the six of them had built from nothing. But that loyalty came at a cost nobody saw coming. It put him on a collision course with Thomas McClary, the same guy he'd once shared a cramped tour bus seat with decades earlier. What followed was a drawn-out trademark fight over who actually owned the right to call themselves the Commodores. Orange won. The name stayed his. But it wasn't really a win in the way people imagine. It was two men who used to be brothers standing on opposite sides of a courtroom, pride and business tearing apart something that once felt unbreakable. Here's where people get it wrong about guys like Orange, though. The assumption is always that a star sitting on decades of royalty checks spends his old age living it up. Mansions, sports cars, that whole Hollywood script. Orange's reality went the other way entirely. A serious chunk of his later years went straight into legal bills just to keep his own band's name out of someone else's hands. And once that battle was finally behind him, he didn't pour the win into anything flashy. He poured it into something quieter, staying close to family, keeping a low profile, making sure the legacy passed down clean to his kids, and the losses kept coming regardless of any courtroom victory. One by one, the guys who lived through all of it with him started disappearing. Milan Williams first, then Ronald LaPread. Each time, Orange was still standing, the last guard watching over a kingdom that mostly exists in memory now. He got to keep the name. He never got to keep the people. That's the real cost hiding behind a life that looked golden from the outside. All that money, all those courtroom wins, none of it buys back a brother who's already gone, and none of it recreates a single one of those nights he used to burn through behind the drums in his 20s, surrounded by the same 5 guys who started it all with him. In 2026, Orange is still part of that legacy, even off the drums. He shows up at Commodores shows, standing beside founding member William W.A.K. King and the band The Mean Machine, watching Cody and Colin carry those classic songs to a new generation of fans who never got to see the original lineup live. Looking at his life now, the lesson's simple enough. The spotlight fades eventually. Courtroom wins fade too. What actually stays is the people you started with, and failing that, the songs that outlive everybody who played them. There's one man still carrying the Commodores into the future: William W.A.K. King. Back in the 1970s, King was impossible to miss. With his thick afro, neatly trimmed beard, and flashy stage outfits, he moved effortlessly across Motown's biggest stages, switching between trumpet and rhythm guitar while keeping perfect step with the rest of the band. Night after night, he played before packed arenas as the Commodores transformed from 6 college friends into one of the biggest groups of the decade, selling millions of records with classics like Easy, Brick House, 3 Times a Lady, and Night Shift. He looked like someone who could keep going forever. Today, at 77, time has naturally changed that image. The afro has been replaced by close-cropped gray hair, the colorful jumpsuits by tailored blazers, and age has brought a slight tremor to his hands. But the determination in his eyes remains remarkably familiar. Away from the spotlight, King now spends far more time with family than chasing celebrity, yet he has never completely stepped away from the music that shaped his life. Long before the fame arrived, King was one of the band's foundations. Back at Tuskegee Institute in 1968, he helped bring together 6 young musicians who believed they could build something lasting. Their friendship became strong enough that they later formed Commodores Entertainment Corporation, ensuring royalties and business decisions were shared among the members rather than controlled entirely by outside executives. That decision helped protect the band as their catalog eventually sold more than 70 million records worldwide. By 2026, King is the only founding member still leading the band under the Commodores name. Even at 77, he continues recording new material, working on projects including a Christmas album while still performing on tour. He also appears on interviews and podcasts such as The Mark Joseph Show, sharing the band's history with younger audiences who never had the chance to watch the original lineup perform live. Behind those appearances lies a quieter reality. After the deaths of Milan Williams and Ronald LaPread, and decades after Lionel Richie and Thomas McClary went their separate ways, King has become the last original captain still steering the ship. Most people assume a songwriter behind a catalog this successful spends retirement enjoying decades of royalty income. King's life tells a different story. As the longtime owner and steward of the Commodores trademark, he has spent years defending the band's name through costly legal battles while continuing to tour to support the musicians, singers, and crew who keep the group alive. For him, the business is no longer about building personal wealth. It's about protecting a legacy that began nearly 6 decades ago and making sure the name The Commodores still means something to the next generation. Now you know William King's journey today. It's hard not to admire his persistence, right? Fame brought fortune, awards, and worldwide recognition, but none of those things lasted as long as the responsibility he chose to carry. Finally, we have Milan Williams. Picture him in the 1970s, surrounded by a towering wall of keyboards, quietly creating the sound that helped define the Commodores. While Lionel Richie drew the spotlight out front, Williams was the musical architect behind it. He wrote Machine Gun, the instrumental hit that became the band's first major breakthrough and introduced their signature funk sound to a national audience. He also helped shape classics like Brick House, contributing to a catalog that would eventually sell more than 70 million records worldwide. He wasn't the member fans screamed for, but he was one of the reasons they kept coming back. Sadly, Williams died on July 9, 2006, at a hospital in Houston after a long battle with leukemia. He was just 58 years old. But the most remarkable part of his story isn't how it ended. It's the choices he made while he still had everything most musicians dream of. By the late 1970s, the Commodores had become one of Motown's biggest acts, selling millions of records, touring internationally, and filling arenas around the world. Limousines, luxury hotels, and royalty checks had become part of everyday life. Yet in 1989, Williams chose to walk away. According to multiple accounts, he refused to perform in South Africa during the apartheid era and left the band shortly afterward. There was no public feud or dramatic farewell, just a quiet decision to leave the spotlight behind, build a home studio, and devote more of his life to family and music on his own terms. Then there was the moment that almost ended everything years earlier. In 1980, while flying his own single-engine plane to a concert, Williams suffered an engine failure over Phoenix, Arizona. Forced to make an emergency landing on a freeway, he escaped the aircraft only moments before it burst into flames. In that instant, decades before illness would take his life, fame, fortune, and platinum records meant nothing. Survival came down to a calm decision, a failing engine, and a narrow stretch of highway. That's what makes Milan Williams' journey so different. He had the hits, the money, and the success to spend the rest of his life chasing even more fame. Instead, he gradually chose a quieter path, one centered on family, personal conviction, and the music he loved. Like the rest of the Commodores, he eventually learned that careers, wealth, and applause all fade with time. Looking back at the Commodores then and now, it's amazing how 6 young men who began with the same dream ended up living 6 completely different lives. Some found unimaginable success. Some chose quiet lives far from the spotlight, while others spent their final years protecting a legacy they built together. Time didn't just change their faces, it revealed what truly mattered to each of them. Perhaps that's the greatest lesson their story leaves behind. Fame fades, fortunes change, and even legends eventually grow old. But the music they created, the friendships they shared, and the memories they gave millions of fans continue to live on. So, whose journey touched you the most, and which story will stay with you long after this video ends? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this look back at the Commodores then and now in 2026, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more unforgettable then and now stories.